Okay. All right. Let's start the meeting. Lisa, you have all the names. We don't need to go through the order. Agenda. Everyone has a copy of the agenda. Anyone need any changes, modifications to the agenda? If not, take a motion to approve.
So move.
There's a second. All in favor, give me a thumbs up emoji. Okay, I think that's unanimous. Minutes, any comments, changes to the minutes from January 8th? If not, take a motion to approve.
So move.
There's a second.
Second.
All in favor, give me a thumbs up. All right, that's unanimous. Any public comments?
Let me just check the inbox quick. I meant to do that right before the meeting. No new comments.
Okay. All right. I do have updates today. So the first little bit of drama we had this week has to do with the PV system. So the town manager must have just realized they're putting PV on this building and sent an inquiry to the bond council to see if we are allowed to use funds for the PV system based off of the referendum that was approved. I am not sure what information the bond council got. Claudia, do you mind going on mute? I'm sorry, I was hearing background noise. I did not speak to bond counsel. I did not provide any information to him. The only person who spoke to him, I'm assuming it's him, I think it's him, was the town manager. And we received a letter from Tony, from the bond counsel. Actually, James Dimitriata sent it to me. Tony sent it to him. James sent it to me. Let me read this to you real quick. Letter from James said, "Dear all, the town received the attached letter today from the bond council at Pullman and Comley. The town asked them to review the proposals for the solar panels to ensure we were in compliance with the referendum scope after questions were raised at the last town council meeting about the authorization. The letter enclosed indicates that the solar panels are beyond the scope of the original authorization and would require us to modify the authorization to be able to use the surplus funds. I believe this to mean a new referendum to amend the authorization for solar panels. Please feel free to distribute to the committee members," which I did. The letter from Holme, and then I will actually send this to you, Lisa, so you can add it to the minutes. The letter says, "Dear Tony, you have asked whether solar panels to be installed on the roof of the middle school are included in the scope of the new middle school project and whether unexpended budget funds can be used for them. The scope of the new middle school project, as authorized by the voters of the town of Cromwell, reads as follows," and then he quoted what it includes: "the planning, design, acquisition, construction, furnishing, equipping of the new middle school. The appropriation may be spent for design, construction, acquisition, site improvements, demolishing materials, installation, blah, blah, blah." And then he goes on to say the authorization contemplates a new middle school and all that would be reasonably that would reasonably be included in such a project. The language in the authorization resolution does not specifically provide for solar panels. While solar panels have been installed in a variety of buildings in other municipalities, they are not something that are reasonably assumed to be included in any or all new buildings. Additionally, after reviewing a record of the proceedings, solar panels were only mentioned once in question raised during the special town meeting held on June 2nd. In response, asking if solar panels are included in the project, response only stated that they may come. Nothing more was discussed and nothing was stated with any certainty that the solar panels were part of the plans or within the budget passed for the project. As such, absent specific mention of their inclusion in the authorization resolution, the proposed plans for the project or the legislative record, solar panels would be considered outside the scope of the middle school project as authorized. While the authorizing resolution is a permissive authorization, it does provide a limitation on the amount of funds that may be expended and what they may be expended on. As a permissive authorization, the town may expend up to the amount appropriated on the authorized scope. However, it is not required to expend all of the appropriation, particularly if the project were to come in under budget. As a limitation, expenditures cannot exceed the amount appropriated, and the project scope cannot be expanded without further authorization. In summary, the funds appropriated pursuant to the authorization resolution can only be used for costs including the project scope. As solar panels are not included in the authorized project scope, unexpended project funds cannot be used for them. In order to use unexpected project funds, the authorizing resolution would need to be amended to modify the project scope to include solar panels. So what I don't understand, and the question that I would have for James when he dials in later is, it does say that this is a permissive authorization. And if we look at the actual referendum, can someone please send James the link for tonight?
Yeah, I just did.
Thank you. So in there is a section that talks about, and I have to find it quick. There is something here in here, I thought, that says the town can make changes.
I have it up, Rosanna, if you want me to.
Yeah, can you share that?
Yep, so it's on the resolution that's dated May 11th, 2020. And it says the Cromwell Middle School Building Committee, following consultation with the town council and the town manager, may reduce or modify the scope of the project, and appropriation may be spent on the project as so reduced or modified.
Right. So this would be a modification. It wouldn't be a reduction. It wouldn't be an increase. We're not increasing the appropriation. We can't do that, obviously. We don't need to. We have the bid savings that we're going to apply to this project, to the PV system. And as Joe, I think, is going to talk about later, the return on investment of these panels, if you take into consideration the fact that they are reimbursable by the state of Connecticut, we'd get the full reimbursement rate of 49%, whatever our reimbursement rate was. And the fact that we have Eversource credits that are coming back. And there's also a tax credit we don't even take into consideration when we think about the ROI. We're looking at like 3 years-ish of return on investment on these panels. Hi, James.
Hi.
So we were just going through the letter from the bond council.
Yep.
And it was interesting. I was reading the letter, the second to last paragraph. So it talks about that the referendum is a permissive authorization. And if you read the referendum, there is a section there says that the town manager and bond council are authorized to make reductions or modifications to the scope of the project, as long as it's within the approved amount of whatever the referendum amount was. So taking those two components together, why wouldn't the town manager and town council be authorized to amend the scope to include the PV system?
So I'm a humble employment and labor lawyer, not a so ask me about a contractor or laying somebody off or sick time or
Yeah.
anything and termination. I can tell you anything you want. Land use, bonding, money, I don't touch it.
Right.
I think that without knowing the answer to your question, I think the question is with the permissive language of the authorization, what does it mean to reduce or modify? Does that, to what extent does that allow for changes that are contemplated within the scope of the project? So, for example, I think I'll use the field as an example. The field is something that is within the scope of the project because we said we were going to build a new field, and so we can define what a new field is for the purposes of replacement of the existing field. So we made that as part of the appropriation, and bond council says that if we choose to do turf, if we choose to do grass, if you choose to do, I don't know, a dirt field with with painted lines, all of that would be encompassed in the definition of what we did. I think his hesitancy appears to be, and again, I've not had the opportunity to speak with him directly.
Are you allowed to speak with him directly?
I believe so. And I think what I want to do is tonight, what I was hoping to learn from you all was just to catch myself up on where we are in the process here. And then I know you have some other items related to the solar panels. And at the very least, I want to put it on my next agenda for council to discuss. And if I can, I'm going to try to talk to this guy prior to the next council meeting so we can get clarification about to what extent is the addition of solar panels is that considered a modification of the scope, or where it could be part of the permissive authorization, or if it is indeed still outside of what he thinks is the authorizing resolution. What's the fastest way we can get an amendment for it? Is that referendum? Is that a town meeting? Because the amount that's being expended, and I think Shannon brought this up earlier when she texted me a really good question about when we have to go to referendum, and it's 10% expenditure. And if it's $1 million for solar panels, I'm making the number up. If it's $1.8 million for solar panels, that's not 10%. So could the council do it through a special meeting instead of a referendum? Would that be appropriate and faster way to get the amendment done? So I think there's a couple of moving parts to it. So I think the next steps for us will be to go back to bond council with any additional information. And I think, Rosanna, you've already provided some additional information, including the state's position on it, so we can review the state's position on it. And I think the issue is the state is looking at it from a reimbursement perspective. And I think bond council's looking from it from a bonding appropriation perspective. So I want to bring him back all of the information and see what the options are. And then if it needs to go to referendum, put that on my agenda for the next meeting. If it needs to go to town meeting, that on the agenda for the next meeting. Or I could call a town meeting even earlier than that if we need to. Or if it can just be modified through a council vote, then I'll have it on as a council vote. So either way, whatever menu of the three options are,
Yeah.
the next council meeting, I'll have that be addressed. So if we can do it through a town meeting, we'll do it through a town meeting. If we can do it through a referendum, we'll do it through a referendum. Or if we can just vote to modify ourselves, we can vote to modify ourselves.
Yeah,
So
because within the new charter, you are allowed to make budgetary decisions up to a certain amount without having to go to referendum, right?
up to 10%. And I think the issue is, though, the referendum that we had originally here, the referendum that we had originally was for this 53 million. So the question is going to be, and I think bond council's position on it is, if we reappropriate part of that 53 million, or whatever it was afterwards. Um,
Yeah, the
do we
72
need to go
million,
back to
yeah.
referendum to amend it again? And when bond counsel gives us an opinion like this, I don't want to open it to liability from a taxpayer who sues the town for expending money that we don't have that we don't have the authorization to do so. So I want to make sure that if it needs to go back, I'm following whatever the right channel is, because I don't want a citizen suit against us for going beyond our authorization. So
But but doesn't that fall upon the definition of a reasonable, like that's the word that he was hinging on was a reasonable construction of the school.
yeah, and the
And
And
definition
I,
reasonableness.
Shannon, I'm sorry. Go ahead. You had your hand up, Shannon.
I was gonna say, yeah, and part of our charge rate was replacement of the school, and since the school does have solar panels, could this be considered as part of that replacement? Was the other
That's
point
true.
I just wanted to note.
Yeah,
The school currently has solar panels.
yeah, so a couple of thoughts on that. I think to the question about reasonableness, I think the problem is that that's an objective test that a fact finder would have to determine whether or not whatever we are doing is reasonably within the scope or not. So whenever there's a reasonableness test and a judge is asked to look at something as reasonable or not, they're going to look at an objective standard and a subjective standard. So I think what bond counsel is saying is that there's a question about the reasonable expectation, um, and whether or not it would include solar panels. And I think that's a question of fact, not a question of law, and a question of fact needs to be answered by a fact finder. So what I want to do is have the meeting. I want to listen into your meeting tonight, get additional information, and then ideally be able to bring it back with all of the different factors that we have, so the council at the next meeting can make a decision according to whatever our council is giving us the advice to. Um, Especially since the money's already been appropriated, I want to make sure that any modifications or alterations within the actual appropriation is following to the T what we are and are not authorized to do. And again, this is not my area of law. This is not my area of expertise. So I'll have to defer to somebody who knows how these things work. I know the resolution references some statutes. I'm not super familiar with those statutes, so I don't know if those statutes spell out reasonableness and how you define reasonableness with the scope of a referendum. So I think to be safe, we go back, we get the information that we need tonight, or I learned the information I need tonight, and I bring it back to the town manager and then ultimately to bond counsel with this additional information. I think it's good to know that the cost analysis is 3 years or 4 years, and it's actually less than what was initially. Now we have the solid numbers that we can actually say we have a cost analysis for it. I think it's helpful to talk about what Shannon just raised, which is this can this be considered a replacement of an existing solar panel that we already had? And then my question would be, to what extent is this a one-to-one replacement, or is this a beyond pure replacement, and is this actually an expansion? And then I can bring that back to bond counsel and have him give me the thumbs up and point the council in the direction it needs to go next week or 2 weeks from now, or 3. Hold on. Yeah, our next meeting would be the 12th, unless I call a special meeting earlier, which I could certainly call a special meeting earlier.
So we are supposed to go to bid in March, and we
Okay.
have a work that's happening right now that we've already authorized Perkins Eastman. We've already approved funding for them to go do this work. We're not going
Okay.
to stop them. Um,
Well, I
Having
wonder.
the meeting in February is going to delay things
Sure,
if
and
we
that's
have to
why
wait till then.
I said I can call a special meeting earlier if we need to. But I think the key for the next step is getting additional information to bond counsel, and putting together that information for them. I don't think we should do or expend any more funds or resources until we get clarification from bond counsel about what is the next step to ensure that we're ironclad legally. Um, and again,
Rosanna?
I feel like deja vu.
yeah,
Anyway,
just for some context too, the way this came up was at the last council meeting. The counselors asked about when we were talking about the fields. The counselors asked if the council can make the decision on the fields, why didn't the council make the decision on the solar panels? And are they both considered the same? The previous letter we had only addressed the issue of the fields, and so the council asked Tony to go back and ask about the solar panels versus the fields. And this, I think that was how this letter came about whether or not the solar panels needed to come back to us. And the letter speaks for itself. Matt.
Jessica, I
Yeah, I'm
think
sorry.
Jessica
I
had her
saw
hand.
Jessica and Matt raising their hands. I apologize.
Good. But Jinx, maybe. So this, if the question came up, you had mentioned, I think bond council went back to a June, did you say 10th meeting? So there was a meeting that they referenced where a question came up and asking whether we were going to have panels on the school, and at the time it wasn't determined. However, the school, I think even through the schematic design phase, the intent was to build the structure such that it would hold solar panels. So I can let Joe, if he wants to, comment on that, but that was our intent all along, and it was whether or not we could add panels was a function of the money, whether we did it now or later. But if it's a question of intent, in my mind, we've built the school to withstand the weight of panels, and we did that intentionally.
Yeah, I think that would be when I talk about getting additional information to bond council, I think that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I will say that at our January 8th meeting, the zoning chairman and vice chairman or chairperson and vice chairperson were there, and they said that solar panels weren't on the site plan. And that's the document they referenced at our last meeting. So I don't know to what extent the infrastructure was on the site plan, because I think if any of the infrastructure was on the site plan, that would be additional evidence of intent. But I think if Jessica, if you and your team can dig up, well, not your team, you know what I mean, you and everybody else, if you guys can dig up additional information about what was available at the time of referendum, that is, I think, part of his assessment of reasonableness is looking to see what was and was not um, raised as part of the plan, because I do recall those conversations. I just don't know to what extent those conversations were publicly available. And I think, again, I'm just looking at what he's writing, what is reasonably assumed and what's not. I think he's looking at, what could a taxpayer or resident look at and have access to. So I think it's different between, us talking about it and it actually being publicized. But I'm sure if we go back, even Shannon's social media posts, I'm sure that there must have been some discussion or question at the time about solar panels. I feel like that was a hot button topic back then.
I think we had a special meeting before the second referendum, correct? And I recall somebody there asking about it. And we said that we were going to make the building solar ready.
Right.
Yeah,
did.
and part of the reason why we said solar ready was that at that time, the state of Connecticut was docking your reimbursement money if you were getting any Eversource grant money. So the recommendation, and it wasn't, you couldn't get reimbursement for it. So the recommendation was to make it solar ready, and then you would pursue that afterwards. That was the advice we got at that time. And obviously that has since changed, right? And the state of Connecticut now will reimburse it and not dock your reimbursement. So that was in our, at the time of referendum, our message was we will make it solar ready. That's something we want to pursue, but due to, grant money, it's not something we can do at this time.
Okay, I gotcha.
Yep. Hey, Mayor James, thanks for dialing in. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of frustration here about it. Maybe we could figure out what we could do better, could have done better next time. One thing I'd ask Jack of is, when we were getting some of the quotes on the solar panels and we we're asking for reasonability, it sounds like, we're not the only school project in the state to have the solar panels included. Did their referendum specifically spell out the application of solar panels as a heat source? I mean, to me, it's just a system's choice. If we were to have done geothermal, which
Yeah.
has a large upfront cost, like, would we have had to spell that out? So it's just, that's fine, James. Like, one person's opinion here from bond council. But I think everyone here kind of is being a little more reasonable about what the intent is. But hopefully it doesn't delay the implementation because it
Yeah,
would
so
sure
I
be a
think
foolish financial decision if
yeah,
we didn't
I
pursue it.
I
Every
think
delay that we have now is going to have a
Mm.
significant impact. We are tight on time, we're tight on costs. So delay
sure,
is money. So if we're going to ask Perkins to stop, just like last time, it's going to add cost to the project.
sure.
So be
But
prepared for
at the
that.
same time, I want to make sure we're doing everything legally, and I can only go based off of what our attorneys are telling us. And if we have additional information to give our attorneys, then I want to get that information to give them to the attorneys.
So you have the phone number for bond counsel. It's on the letterhead. Can you call them tomorrow?
I cannot tomorrow. I'm in negotiations. But
Can
I
I
could
call them tomorrow?
technically I think it should come from my office. So I mean anybody can call them, but I don't think I'm even author. I need it's talking to a town attorney. I think I have to go through the town manager's office to do that because it's chargeable time to the town. I mean, I guess anybody could call them, but I think if you want to call them with the town manager, I don't see why you couldn't do that. But I think it would either need to be through my office or through the town manager's office.
Yeah. And then Rosanna, just remind like what would or maybe Joe can speak to like what work would incur, say, over the next a couple weeks on this that we would ask to be paused? I mean, is it, you know, is it really, I mean, it's not like they're actually bringing in materials. Is it just, you know, finalizing some of the drawings or finalizing the big packages? Is that, Joe? I don't want to oversimplify it, but I just want to give the mayor some sense for when we say, oh, there's some work to be done to keep the timeline in scope. What does that work kind of entail?
If I could, Rosanna,
Mhm.
the work in front of us now, the design team is waiting for feedback from Eversource. Any revisions that Eversource is looking for would need to be incorporated in the documents before we go to the state for our plan review and ultimately go to bid. Right now, with less than 100% drawings, we haven't had Newfield start any of their pre-construction activities to build the bid package and get ready to go to bid. So it could be that in this time that we're waiting for Eversource and then ultimately the design team's adjustments to meet the Eversource requirements, all of this stuff can be sorted out. If we have to have a second referendum and there's a notice period and this and that, then we're going to get into the realm of a delay, which is going to push the bid date outward. And we're trying to get this done while forces are still on site so we can save some oversight monies. But I'd say if in the next couple of weeks, because last I heard, we have gotten no response yet back from Eversource from the review of our documents. So if this is something that can be reconciled within the next week or two, it shouldn't have anything detrimental, any detrimental impact on the schedule.
Okay, so John, since it seems like if I'm hearing you right, the internal review stuff is still ongoing, and that's not gonna cost anything extra. Eversource just needs to provide feedback. That will give me and the town time to, if you guys gather, so we can gather additional information about what was available pre-referendum regarding solar panels. You can gather the additional, you have the cost benefit study that you just did. You have the documentation that we already sent to the state. We can run it all by bond council again, but if bond council maintains the same position, then I need to get it to referendum as quickly as possible. And I need to find out I don't know that process by heart. I would have to look to see what my minimums and maximums are for days for that. I don't know. But I can certainly get that ball rolling by on Friday, and then if we need to call a special meeting, I can do so for next week and get the ball rolling on it. So I think in the short term, maybe over the course of today through tomorrow, well, since it's the end of business today, through tomorrow, if folks can get together and put their brains together and look to see what information was publicly available pre-referendum, either one or two, regarding solar panels. Were there public discussions about it? Were there social media posts from the committee about it? Were there plans that were published and reviewed that showed solar panels or explained solar panels or discussed the impact of solar panels? Because I think the way bond council is viewing it is that this is a addition that wasn't contemplated in the original authorization. And if we can demonstrate, sorry,
Bless
I'm
you.
sorry.
That's-
If we can demonstrate information to the contrary, I think that will be part of his assessment. And if not, then we need to pause until I can get the referendum to go where it needs to go in order to get it approved. Because I don't want to do anything now that I know this information. I've been put on notice that would create liability for the town.
What was
Jack,
the analogy? Oh,
I was gonna say, Jack and Rosanna,
Go
we still haven't submitted to Eversource because we're still waiting for the information that CES requested to complete the application. We have not received that yet, and from the town or from the district. I'm not
And
not sure
they're
who
not
that
gonna
comes from.
they're not gonna provide that until they get this figured out. So
Okay.
now so Eversource has not been super quick in their response. So the longer it takes for the town to provide this information, the longer it's going to take for us to get the response out of Eversource.
I stand corrected. Thank you, Joe.
So there is going to be a delay.
Okay. So, but I mean, so I think we know what information that I need to get to bond counsel. I mean, realistically, do you think we can get that together by Friday? So I can I can review it with the town manager and bond counsel.
What information you just want what we talked about prior to
So
the referendums?
and maybe I'm reading the tea leaves a little bit here, but what bond counsel talks about is that acknowledging that the appropriation that is authorized doesn't specify solar panels. The question is is a solar panel furnishings, equipment, technology, material, site improvements. Okay, so what is included in those terms? His conclusion appears to be that he doesn't think it's reasonable to assume solar panels were part of what is included in that list, specifically because he doesn't think that it appeared in any of the notice. He focused on the June 2nd meeting about solar panels. I think what would be helpful, right, is additional information that whether it's June 2nd, the Facebook page, the appropriation, any of the other town meetings, the pre-planning meetings that the building committee had that discuss solar panels, because I think his assessment of reasonableness is based off of what is in the public record. So if there are, to Jessica's point earlier, comments on the record or posts on the record or notes in the minute that reflect a public discussion about solar panels being included in the appropriation amount that we were asking for, right? So if the building is being built with infrastructure that will enable solar panels to be added, does that mean that there was a reasonable expectation that the solar panels are part of this project? Like, did somebody say if we are under budget, solar panels will be added, right? Or did somebody say, let's build the building so in the future we can apply for a grant for solar panels, right? Those would be two different, the person hearing that would have two different conclusions. If one was, if we have extra money, we're going to do solar panels, it's assumed solar panels are in there. But if the discussion was in some future phase, if the town gets a grant, we can install solar panels, and that would assume that it's not included. So I think what bond counsel needs, or the information we need to get to bond counsel to have a final decision about whether or not to go to referendum, is whether or not there's publicly available information that included solar panels that would push it to the side of saying that it is part of the phase project. If that exists, then great, we can present that to bond counsel. If that doesn't exist, I want to get it to referendum as soon as I possibly can. So if it doesn't exist and
But
it's
Well,
not
why do you need
clear,
referendum if it's within the threshold of the town council? Like it's under a certain amount. You only need referendum if
I
it's a
think
certain
it's
amount.
I think it's because we're using the 53 or whatever the million was that was originally appropriated to go to bonding, because I think we're using the bonding money for it.
But
I
they're
will ask,
authorized to change scope, though.
I will
The
also
verbiage
ask
says that.
I will ask if we can authorize and change scope. My understanding is that question was asked, and he said that because it was not it's not understood to be reasonably included, we can't change the scope to be something that's not reasonably included. Now, again, if we can get the foundational information to bond counsel, then I'm happy to have that conversation.
so
Uh,
at that point though, instead of using like the school bonded money, would it just make sense to do it as a separate after the fact project through the town council?
we could explore that too if people would prefer to do it that way.
You just wouldn't get the reimbursement for it if you did it that way.
Yeah, my thought would be to do it through it. Okay, my thought A is to get new information to bond counsel and see if that amends what he thinks about it. Option B is, in the absence of that, find out what's the fastest way for me to get a vote on amending it to include solar panels. I think the public would be widely supportive of solar panels if the numbers Rosanna was talking about before I came on are accurate with the 3 to 4 year equalization of cost benefit. Then I think it would be vastly favored. And I think it would be something that I think everyone would be on board with. I certainly would be on board with it if with those numbers that she was quoting before. I just, again, want to make sure I'm doing it legally and the town's doing it legally. So if we can get any information from the pre-appropriation time that would indicate solar panels were inherently included in what we were intending, then I'll bring that back to bond counsel, and I can do that on Friday with Tony. And if it's not, then I need to get it to referendum or a town meeting, or what I would do is have a special meeting on solar panels and figure out what are my pathways forward for this.
So I think with a permissive authorization, you would have a public meeting that says we're planning to vote on this, and then if people petition for it to go to referendum, they can petition it. But I don't think you have to. I think you do a vote just like we did
For the library,
like people just come into the room and vote right there and then. You don't need
a town meeting.
Vote at the town meeting.
The only question I would have for bond counsel is, because it's part of something that already went to referendum and was a big number, can we do it again? Can we amend it that
But
way?
this is not asking for more funding. You have to be very clear. We're not asking for additional funding.
You're
We're asking for
reappropriating.
a modification to scope. So you have to be really clear that's a modification to scope.
So
Because if you're asking for more money, that changes the whole discussion. If you're just modifying the scope, that's simpler. It should be simpler.
Yeah, so why don't can we plan on, if you guys can get together any data that we have, any documents, Facebook posts, architectural drawings, meeting minutes that reflect have the word solar panel in it, put those together in a packet, give them to me. Email them to me. I can try to set up a meeting with bond counsel and say, here's the additional information that we have. Does this change your calculus or not? And if it does, I'm going to have him I'm going to ask him to issue to Tony a new letter and then send it to the council saying, okay, we're in the green. I just don't want to have us move forward with something and then somebody being able to say, well, that's not what I wanted my tax dollars spent on. I'm going to sue the town. I think that's not favorable.
But again, to Matt's point, like there's nothing specific that says what type of energy generation we had for this building. We could have put geothermal and we could have put like anything we wanted in there. You know what I mean? It's a mechanical hardware that drives power for the building. So what exactly makes it unreasonable? Unreasonable to me is like you're going to put a swimming pool in the building that no other middle school in the state of Connecticut has, but we want to put a swimming. That's unreasonable because middle schools are not, per the state of Connecticut, middle schools should not have swimming pools. But per the state of Connecticut, they want all new municipal buildings to have solar panels to be more energy efficient. That is their new requirement for the state, for the governor. So that, if the state of Connecticut deems it reasonable, and if not actually, I shouldn't say it's not mandatory, but they actually are encouraging it. You know what I mean? Like the word reasonable is very ambiguous.
Well, and that's why, that's in when I do sexual harassment investigations, right? The question I have to prove in court is whether or not what the reasonable objective person would think versus the subjective person, or discriminate. I do a lot of discrimination cases, and we use a reasonableness standard for whether or not the conduct was reasonable. And it's a fact-specific inquiry. And I think bond counsel says, absent specific mention of their inclusion in the authorizing resolution, the proposed plans for the project, or the legislative records, the solar panels would be considered outside of the scope of the project as authorized. And I think he's saying based off a reasonableness standard. So I think in order to demonstrate on the other side of the line we need to demonstrate it's either part of the proposed plan, part of the authorizing resolution, or part of the legislative record. In absence of that, if the answer to that question is no, then we go to question B, which is this considered a modification of the original appropriation per the resolution that is within the scope of council authority? If answer is yes, then maybe we can just modify it at a special meeting. If answer is no, how do we reallocate the additional money or change the scope? Does that require a referendum? If the answer is yes, requires referendum, then question 3 will be, if yes, referendum, how fast can I get the referendum? I don't know the answer to that as I'm sitting here. I don't know what the scope is for a referendum turnaround.
Well, if I make comment, Rosanna, I've had projects interpreted to require a confirming referendum when, for instance, a project was originally envisioned to be a renovation and it turned out to be cheaper to build a new building. And bond counsel for that client said, well, your referendum used the word renovation. Since you were intending to build new, you've got to go back and put the question out. And we did. It took us about a month, but we passed with flying colors, because everyone's thought was, let's do the smarter thing, spend less money and get a better building. Absolutely, I vote yes. So that was just a matter of that lost number of weeks in the process. For this particular situation, I think to be able to roll this into the project, which is already funded, which already has state authorization, which already has a project team in motion, versus treating it as something you'll come back and do at a later date, even though the state is, very pro buildings being provided with solar. I think that's you're gonna spin more wheels and spend more time in doing things over than we're likely to be experiencing by this brief pause, if in fact we have to go that far. I agree with Rosanna's comment that we're hoping that we can find enough documentation to point you in that direction that shows that. And I do recall, as Ken Cleveland mentioned, discussions in the run-up to referendum number 2 about what about PV, and we said if we can afford it, we're making provisions to accept it with the structure to take the weight and the electrical system to have some place to run the wires to, but we don't know if we can afford that yet, so that's something we'll decide at a later date. So there was a conversation. I haven't found a document yet. The closest I've come is a draft of a Perkins Eastman slideshow from the building committee in February of 23. They're talking about our value engineering as we were running up towards the conversation of a second referendum for the additional funds, that says important criteria, and on the bottom of that list says existing solar panels, potential for reuse, understanding that we've already got equipment that's on the roof of the building we're about to knock down. Is it prudent to incorporate that into the design? In the end, because of the life that they've already aged, it's not prudent to put all that infrastructure investment into remounting them on a brand new building. You would get that, perhaps a quicker than 4-year payback, but you might not have anywhere, well, you probably will not have anywhere near the useful life of it. So why spend the money on the infrastructure just to get a short-term benefit? So even from this slideshow, in advance of asking for the additional funding, there were conversations within the building committee about solar panels.
So I think that's exactly the type of information that we would give to bond counsel.
Mm-hmm.
If that was a publicly available PowerPoint that was presented at least the building committee meeting, if not the council meeting and the building committee meeting, then we've satisfied our evidence. I think, John, that's an excellent point. And I recall those conversations. I just don't recall if they were in a private context or in a public context.
Right. So Joe Collada, if what I have here is that it was a draft for the February 15, 2023 building committee meeting. So if you can pull up the real deal that was shared with the building committee that at that meeting, then we can forward that on, as one piece of data for the mayor's use.
So
Okay.
James,
and-
oh, sorry, go ahead, Joe.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, just a question. You know, we've been talking solar panels now since, gosh, last year,
Mhm.
at least, right?
Mhm.
James, why did the town manager decide now to go to bond council and ask, since he was aware that we had this on our project?
The council asked him to ask this original question that was brought up at our last meeting was why does the building committee have the ability to amend on their own for solar panels, but not for fields? So why couldn't fields be treated in the same? Now we because we got an opinion from bond council that fields was included in the project scope and doesn't need to go to referendum, and that we could amend it. The question was raised, why did the building committee not have to do the same process for the solar panels? And in the discussion, the council wanted an opinion from bond council about do the solar panels have to come back to us as well, just like the fields have to come back to us, or was this included in the original scope? And from that question begat this answer, or I guess begat a conversation that led to this letter about, wait a minute, no, we actually, it's not a matter of coming back to the council for solar panels. It's actually a matter of going back to the voters for solar panels. So it came out of, I think Councilman Bonneau raised the question, and then we discussed it through the course of that meeting when we were also discussing
So if the question was never raised, then we could have been potentially going down a path that would have opened us up to liability.
I think now that once you you open a door and you find out what's on the other side of it, you can't pretend we can't unring the bell, we can't close the door. So I think the problem is we rang the bell on ourselves. And now we have an opinion that's adverse to what I think all of us would want. I think the intention was good, because I think the question the council had was a legitimate one. If we have to do the fields, shouldn't we also vote on the solar panels? Is that included? And I think the answer we were originally anticipating was either solar panels part of building the original scope, or yeah, you need to modify for the solar panels like we're doing for the field. But the answer we got was the solar panels are actually outside of the scope that we can modify ourselves.
I'm looking at a
Jessica?
copy of pardon for jumping, I'm not being
That's
very
okay.
polite here. I'm looking
No,
at a
you're
copy of the schematic design presentation.
Mhm.
12/21/22 schematic design presentation to the building committee. Page 23 of 48 is a roof plan, and there are solar panels all over the place with a
Great.
note, photovoltaics NIC, not in contract. Because again, we weren't sure we were going to be able to afford them, but we wanted to explore how they might fit on the building, and what sort of capacity the building might have to generate. So this is another example of a document we can forward on for your use.
So can I ask how much documentation is showing our due diligence? Like, maybe let me back up. My real question here is, when the question was raised, is it reasonable to expect that the building committee should have come in to answer that question? I mean, if it went straight to bond council and bond council looked at one meeting of public record, all of our meeting minutes, all of our meetings are recorded. We could have answered these questions and done the due diligence ahead of time, and perhaps come back to town council and provided information that might have been satisfactory or not, and then still have gone to bond council. I'm trying to think, how can we be more proactive in the future rather than after the fact doing rework on things that we've already done, things that we've paying to go to a town attorney when perhaps we could have provided all the information in advance. But look, how could we do this differently next time?
Yeah, I think
Hopefully there isn't a next time. I mean, put
no,
that out
and,
there, but just
and I think part of the problem was this was begat from another conversation that, right, the reason we asked the question was because the question was raised about the fields. And
Mhm.
so, I'm just looking to see what, yeah, so I'm just looking at our minutes. So I'll just read what our minutes reflect. The conversation was longer than this. Finance director explained that she reached out to the project manager, Arcadis. The project manager stated the project does not have a surplus at this point. She clarified that they have a construction bid saving, not a surplus. She said that they went to the state to get approval for solar panels. The bid saving is 2.1 million. The solar panels are 2 of the 2.1 million. She explained that Eversource still has to analyze the documents. There could be an adjustment of the 2 million after review. Additionally, the architect and the project manager fee could increase due to changes in phase 4. There was a discussion regarding the purchase of solar panels and if the town council is supposed to approve the purchase or if the building committee has the authority. The town manager said he would look into this. So that is where this came from, was that discussion. And as part of that discussion, I think it's not reflected in the minutes, but I recognized Mike Kanata and Alice Kelly because they said, well, we have the middle school built site plan that we approved. It doesn't have solar panels. And then the council was like, well, okay, so let's ask bond council. They just told us for the field, we have to do the field. Ask bond council if we have to do the solar panels. And so that's where, this begat. So I think, and I need to make sure that either myself or one of the other counselors are at every one of these meetings, or I need to make sure that somebody from your committee is always at our meetings, and it's tough. Wednesday nights aren't always, I'll take blame on that. I can't make every Wednesday night meeting, and I have not been the best about attending. And I read the minutes, but I can only report out. And when a question like that was asked, I think the council thought, oh, bond councils. I assume, maybe wrongfully, I assumed bond council was going to come back and say solar panels same as field, solar panels not same as field. I didn't anticipate this third rail, which was solar panels different than field, and also with outside of the scope. I don't think that was an anticipated response. And I think looking at what he said was the factors he considered, I think exactly what John just outlined are the missing pieces that bond council doesn't have. I think the fact that you have a schematic that shows solar panels, it reads to intent. And if that was publicly presented at a meeting, then that reads to intent, and that's part of the missing piece. And bond counsel, when they analyze that, may come back and say, okay, this is a modification akin to the fields. You need to also vote on that. I don't know. And if that's what he tells me, then that's what I'm going to go with. But to your question, Jessica, it's an excellent process question. I think I need to be better about coming to your meetings, or I need to make sure that somebody from your committee can come to my meetings, or vice versa. And I'll take full ownership for that.
Or even if something comes up, we can be a specific agenda topic and be there. That's
Yeah.
to answer
And
those questions too. That's I think another option.
yeah, I mean, I think those are all options. And this was kicking around for a week before we got that letter. And so I was thinking we would just get together and have a meeting on it. And then I got the letter, which changed, what I think we have to do about it. Because let me just look at something really quickly. When did the letter come in? So yeah, the letter came in on the 21st, and on the 20th, Rosanna and I were emailing about meeting to go over all the stuff with the solar panels. So that's how quickly it's changed. The letter is from the 21st. On the 20th, I was saying to Rosanna, hey, can we meet? The town's talking about with Eversource. I think we need to talk about the solar panels. Again, I think that was in anticipation of the answer coming back that it was either like the fields or not like the fields. So I think I was trying to set up a meeting before we got this letter, and this letter was adverse to the outcome I was hoping for. So I think my diligence could have been better in probably maybe realizing this earlier, but I honestly didn't think about it until it was raised on the 8th when a counselor asked, well, what's the difference between turf and solar panels? That's where somebody raised the question, and we were like, what is the difference? Why is, one's a modification, one's not? Is that included in the original? How do we handle that? So I think that's where it begatted from. Sorry, I keep using the word begat. I feel like I'm in Genesis.
Shannon, you have a
Yeah.
question?
Yeah, I think just from a process point, if, something related to the building project is on the town council agenda, it would be great if that our meetings don't conflict. I mean, I know, we wanted to be present at that meeting, and I think that maybe could have, just kind of helped for us to hear it and answer questions, but obviously our meetings were in conflict that day, so maybe that's something that could be for a special meeting or another agenda time.
Yeah, and that's definitely a mistake on my part because I think what I was trying to do was to try to get the conversation on turf moving as quickly as possible because I knew we had a tight deadline on that and I wanted to start the conversation. And given the outpouring of public feedback on it, I made the decision before the meeting that we'd have a special meeting on it. I don't think I anticipated that this particular question would have been risen, but the point is very well taken, Shannon. I definitely think, and I think that's part of the reason why we decided to continue it to a special meeting. And not only is it a special meeting now, but it's a special public hearing, which means that the rules of normal debate don't apply. So members of the public can speak for longer than 2 minutes versus citizens' comments where they can only speak for 2 minutes. So it allows it to be a true public hearing on the turf field, which is on February 3rd. So I think I'll take full ownership for that. That's a lesson learned on my part.
All right. So I think we know what we need to do. We'll try to get you that information, James, on whatever we have. Jack, if you can point me to that document you're referring. I
Mhm.
had the pictures of the photos, both the candidates. I'll send that over to James. And then
One other thing we may want to look at. I recall when CES presented the mechanical systems to us, they may have discussed solar panels in that presentation too. And
Yeah,
that would have
so
been
I think
a very early on meeting.
so. Whatever you can get me. And again, the question is, right, the bond counsel says absent specific mention in either A, the authorizing resolution, B, the proposed plans, or 3, the legislative record, it'd be outside of the scope. So the more stuff you can get me that shows proposed plans or legislative record, the better off I think the solar panels are. Um, I don't know, also know the timeline for a referendum, if it's 30 days or 15. I honestly don't know how quickly referendum can go once we authorize it. I don't know. I tried to just look it up, and it's all about like voting. Like I'm looking at the Connecticut general statutes on it, and it's all about like Secretary of State and posting requirements, and it's saying 45 days, but I don't think that's right. I feel like that's not relevant to this kind of referendum, but I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that we actually have to go to a full referendum. I feel like we can do a town vote, a public hearing, uh, based again on the fact that the verbiage um, in the referendum talks about the town manager being able to modify scope. So
Yeah,
I
I'll
think,
ask the question again. I think that question may have been asked, but it's not specifically addressed in the letter, so I can ask for that question to be
yeah.
specifically addressed.
Okay. And then the turf field, so originally we had said that we needed a decision by the end of this month to keep within our schedule. Um, I will say that and that was kind of like a drop dead date, end of the month. That was already pushing it. We really needed the end of last year. So if that discussion happens on February 3rd and the town council decides to move forward,
It would be that night as well, Rosanna. I have it as at possible action.
it will just drive delays because we would have to go, we assumed we would be able to go to planning and zoning like earlier, now to get on their agenda unless they're going to do a special meeting for us. Like it creates a lot of entropy now that um we just didn't plan for. So
Well, may I just address that one point with that really quickly? I think part of the discussion at our council meeting was regarding, I think there was an email from somebody in Arcadis that said we don't recommend moving forward with it at this time or something like that, and that was part of the confusion that we had at that meeting. I'm trying to find the
I think Sharon misunderstood a conversation that I had with her, and led her to a conclusion that she would not recommend the town move forward with the field at this time. I think part of the confusion came into the discussion of costs for the PV. And we've since confirmed that the 1.5-ish million budget is all inclusive, including the design fees and contingencies. So that subtracted from the, and Emily, correct me if I'm incorrect here, about 3.2 million in bid savings.
Correct.
Gives us, much more than Sharon was thinking when she was doing her calculations as to what might be available for the turf on the field.
Yeah.
So I think that that was unfortunately, we shared some discussion, and then she came to some conclusions that we were not aware of, and they were a little bit off in the projection. So that and we have since that meeting confirmed that the estimate did contain all of the contingencies and design fees. So
John?
again, it was unfortunately a little bit unclear when we were having that conversation.
I just, John, I hear you. The sentence that stands out to me in Emily's email to Sharon was due to the fact that, quote, due to the fact that some bigger bid items, PVC and technology, are still open, I would not recommend earmarking the savings for a turf field. That I think that quote, I'm glad that it's clarified now, but I think to Sharon's defense,
Mhm.
she read the email verbatim to us, and we all interpreted that to base that saying that, it says I would not recommend earmarking the savings for a turf field. I'm glad that's been clarified now, but that was the information that was from the 8th. So
Yeah, and to the positive side, further clarification is that 3.2 is the bid savings, which has been sequestered in their own line in the budget. And we have owner's contingency dollars that are covering things such as if the furniture comes in a little bit over bid or whatever. And we're actually finding savings on the furniture bids. So I think we're now probably a month down the road. We're in a much clearer financial picture. And again, as I said, Sharon didn't have the benefit of what we've clarified in the last month when that discussion went forward. So I think should there be a special hearing, special meeting, the information that is now current, I think is going to be a lot more encouraging to everyone involved.
I agree.
What's the urgency with getting the field finalized now? I would think we're like over a year out from even starting to install it.
They've gotta get all the drawings redone, have to go to planning and zoning, then they have to go to bid, then they have to do all that. So the building's coming down like middle of June. Like as soon as school comes, they're tearing everything down. They have to put new irrigation, or not irrigation, new drainage into the field. So they have to go prep the site work for that. So there's a lot of work that has to happen before they actually put the field in. And if you backtrack that all back towards like, okay, let's get all the documentation ready for it, it brings you to like right now.
Okay.
All right.
And sorry, before I leave this, I'm not going to add to the
Go ahead.
conversation. I just a question. When we talked about with Joe and Jack here, where things stand with Eversource. Sorry, just so we be very specific. What has been applied for to Eversource or has not? Can you clarify?
Matt, it's the interconnection application, and CES had requested through us certain information that needs to go along with that application before they can submit it.
Okay, so
And part of that process, they will review the plans and provide any comments on the plans as they currently stand.
Right. Okay, so the interconnection application has not been submitted.
No.
And it's awaiting some information from the town,
Yes.
which we're not going to get anytime soon. Until, James, there's a resolution. So
Yeah, I think once we resolve the once we resolve, exactly, yes, you're right. Short answer, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments on any of this stuff before we move on? We do have an agenda. Okay. Sorry, I had it up and then I was searching for things I put down. Do-do-do-do. All right. Communications.
No report.
All right. Heather.
Nothing from design.
All right. Perkins.
Okay, I think either Jack or Emily needs to make me a host or co-host.
You should be all set now, Joe.
Okay. All right. Can you see my presentation?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so we have the standard agenda that we've had over the last few meetings, our field report, FF&E and technology update, FF&E procurement update, and then a PV system update. So our field report, we're going back out to the site on Friday. Consultants have been continuing their site visits as needed. And we've been continuing to review submittals and RFIs, hopefully getting to the end of the submittals at some time soon. And then we have some field photos from our last visit out on the 10th. So main entry, a view of the courtyard with the amphitheater seating getting installed. This is the view of the north end of Main Street, that entrance there. Moving inside, this is the view back out of that entrance. So you can see all the steels up, sound attenuations going in, insulations going in for the exterior walls. This is a view of the cafeteria, and then a view of one of the science classrooms. I'm thinking on the second floor, based on the elevation of the trees. Any questions? FF&E update. So bids, again, this is not changed. Bids have been awarded, state contract quotes awarded, and direct purchase will be pending award closer to the install date, so that deliveries can be coordinated for that. Bid number 2 has been issued. It's out on the street. We issued the addendum today and looking to open bids next Wednesday. And then for the technology portion, again, we've received sole source approval and network switches for the product and the integrator. The wireless access points for product only. We waiting for review on the integrator. The phone, we had to provide a little bit more information. I think that's going in tomorrow for the reviewer, and update a couple of forms for that. Interactive displays have been approved for product. And the server and firewall is still pending the review of the revised spec. Once all that's completed, then we'll complete our review with our reviewer. Any questions there? And our schedule, mid-January, so we're in the procurement period here for the bid number 2. And then we'll be looking to award at the next building committee meeting for the bid items there. Tech is still to be determined, and install is still on schedule for starting in May for deliveries. And that would be for the admin spaces in the new building. And then for the classroom, we have a couple layout options of the requested additional furniture here. So we're looking to provide a kidney-shaped table with 4 student chairs and a teacher's chair. And then we received some field information on the location of the outlets on the exterior wall. So we would be able to fit either 5 42-inch long bookcases that would just barely fit in the 1710 that is available in the field condition. Or if we stayed with the 36-inch long bookcases, we could fit 4. We could then also leave the operable window completely free of a bookcase, and then provide the other 2 to get the 6 that were requested in other locations throughout the classroom. It is not required to leave this open. The only requirement for a emergency window would be the sill height, which we are meeting that, and the size of the window. There's no requirement for a depth of sill or anything like that in the code. We're also looking for two bookcases per science classroom. You can see them. We were showing them here, just a little snip of that. And then I think that was it.
So-
Oh, and then offices would be another 24 bookcases total that we'd have to determine where those were going.
Hey, Joe, am I misreading the document on the bottom of the footnote there? Like there's two possible classrooms, a 42 inch.
Yes. So there'd be two options here. If we wanted them all to fit along the exterior wall between the
Mhm.
receptacles, and maximize the amount of bookcase, we could go to 5 at 42 inches long. If it was acceptable to place them in other portions of the classroom.
Oh, that's where there are other
we could do
places in the
6,
classroom.
yeah,
That's where I missed.
6 at
Okay.
36. We could fit a 5th one here, but I was just showing that as another option that window could be left
Yeah.
without a bookcase in front of it and still fit the 6 in the room.
Claudio, is there a preference?
Oops.
Preference is 6 in a typical classroom.
So you want the option B?
If I can, I think we'd rather have them all under the window because the space is so tight otherwise.
Yeah, no, we're planning to put them all underneath the window.
Yeah,
So do
so,
the 5 42-inch long ones?
because if you can't get 6 under the window, is that correct? Only
Right.
5 of the
Right.
36?
Right, you would block, at least in the 2 classrooms that we had field dimensions, you would, and if you went with 6 of the 36, you would block at least one of the receptacles.
I'm not worried about blocking one of the receptacle, so I'd rather put 6 bookcases in there.
We're not blocking receptacles. Is the dimensions, is that between the plates, or is that center line of the outlet?
I assumed it was center line, so that's where the 5 at 42 would be 17.6 in length, so it would be right to the edge of the plate.
Okay.
It would barely fit at that, but it would also give you 17.6 along that wall of the 18 feet that was originally requested.
And these are loose, they can move around, right? Like if a teacher
They-
wanted to move one.
They could, but typically and I believe the state requires bookcases to be secured to the wall.
Okay.
If they're against the wall.
So if they're secured
So
to the
it's-
wall, we're not blocking outlets.
Right. The teachers won't like that. And then I think that goes against code. Isn't there a reason why you have to have them at certain space, certain part or whatever?
I'm sorry, what was the question there?
There's a reason why outlets have to be spaced a certain distance apart. I feel like that's gonna violate some code to have an outlet covered.
Yeah, you do need, I don't know the exact electrical code on the placement of outlets, but you do need them every certain number of feet. I'd have to
Alright.
look into that and check with CES on the actual code restriction there.
Yeah, so the 5 42 inches, if I'm understanding correctly, that would give 210 inches of total bookcase space versus the 6 36 inches, which would be 216 inches of bookcase space.
Right. 6
So
inches.
Blaze, to your point, to keep them underneath the window in that arrangement, it would be 6 inches less than what was requested.
Right, but my understanding is the 42s would then leave the outlets available, whereas the 36s would not. Is that
Right.
correct?
That's correct.
If you place
Yeah.
the 636s along, at least in the 2 classrooms that we had confirmed, it would cover one outlet at least,
Got it. Yeah, so
depending on how
the
they were
6,
placed.
so reducing by 6, those 6 inches gets you the outlets. That seems to make sense.
Yeah, yes, but if
Okay.
there's any classrooms where it's 17.6 between the outlets, because we didn't verify every single one, this is literally squeezing it right in between. I just want to make that clear.
I'm sorry. You're saying that other classrooms may be sized differently?
The spacing could be different. Yes,
Could it be more narrow than the 1710?
could be, yes.
So what do we need to figure that out first?
Oh, if you want them all at the exterior window, then the recommendation would be to go to 5 36-inch long bookcases, and that should ensure that the outlets would be clear.
Murphy's Law says they're not all going to be 1710.
Yeah. So if we did 5 36 and then 1, and you're saying we can't have floating bookcases, so then we'd have to define where the 6th one went.
Mm-hmm.
I think, again, I would prefer that you just do the 5 then. I think the extra bookcase becomes problematic. Not every class is going to use all the book classes, mainly just the language arts classes. So having another one floating around somewhere then limits your flexibility with everything else.
Yeah, I think having 5 will eliminate any question. We don't have to worry about will it fit, will it won't fit, will it cover a plug or not. Just go with 5, and there should be plenty of space between the 2 plugs.
I agree, and there should be plenty of space on those bookshelves for everything that they need, along with the cabinetry.
I agree.
Jack and Emily, do you know if the state requires all bookcases to be secured to the wall, or is it above a certain height?
I think there may be a height restriction because something 36 inches tall is not going to fall over and crush somebody like a 7-footer that's full of books. So I think that's a question that bears asking.
Yeah, I'd have to look into that.
And it also depends on the classroom for the size too.
Age group.
Yeah, for the age group, exactly. Thanks. If you're talking about a kindergarten classroom or a classroom where kids are more prone to hanging on, it's that. But typically, it's not enforced. I think if you go for a taller bookcase, like a 6-7 foot, then yes, it would have to be bolted.
For comparison, we've seen media centers done with all mobile bookcases.
Right.
So 4-footers on wheels, and they're obviously not attached to a wall. So I think for the height that we're talking here, I think that the reasonable person would expect that we won't have to bolt them down, but it bears asking.
So let's assume that we don't. Blaze, would you feel like that 6th bookcase would be kind of in your way at that point?
I think it's not necessary. I think we've got plenty of shelf space and cabinet space. It won't make a significant difference. I'll just have to, explain that to the language arts teachers.
Okay. I'm
Get
sure
rid of
other
those.
classes that probably don't need all these bookcases.
No,
too,
they
I
don't.
think.
The only
They can
ones
share. They can give them over
Yeah.
to language arts teachers if they needed them.
That's true. We could store additional books, or they can get rid of all those books from 1924. Nobody needs the Scarlet Letter anymore.
So
All
we're saying
right, so
5
we're going with
bookcases
5.
at 36 inches long.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And 30 inches high, right?
And 30 inches high.
The more storage space you have, the more stuff they keep. So Blaze is right.
And I don't know if we mentioned it last time, but each classroom does have a full bank of cabinets, lowers and uppers, and a teacher's wardrobe. So every classroom has that.
Yep.
So this one. Okay.
Do we need to vote on that? Or is general agreement acceptable?
I think
not sure.
Then I believe a general agreement, it's acceptable as long as the committee members agree on the decision so that Perkins can procure exact item from the existing vendors on state contract.
Does anyone object to the 5 by 36 inch bookcases? Okay.
Nope.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, so the bookcases, the student chairs, and the table are state contract items. The teacher's chair, we actually had to add by addendum because our addendum date was today to increase that as part of the next bid. So that was in the bid for today, for next week, sorry.
Okay.
All right, the topic of
Do
the
you
night.
have a sorry, just like estimated cost on all of that?
I don't currently. I could based on what we had for the state contract items, and I could give you an estimate for the teacher's chair for the additional 39, and then we could give you numbers. I could send that to Rosanna tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you. And then this will come out of Jack, our contingency.
Owner
No, this
contingency.
will, well, Jack, not yet because we still
So you have unspent FF&E funds.
FF&E, exactly. So it will all come from the existing FF&E available budget.
Okay.
We're
These,
currently trending under budget.
right. These costs, the pending bid costs that will be received next Wednesday, and those items are still need to be purchased in May. We're hoping will all fit under the FF&E budget, right, Joe?
So we're hoping would have to double check that.
I think our rough numbers last time was like 120,000-30,000, something like that, which that was like, I think on the conservative side.
I think, yeah, that was for bookcases. So yeah, I just have to confirm it. I'll send an email about that
It's like
tomorrow.
55,000 and 70,000, I thought. Together. I don't remember.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like rough order of magnitude is fine. Just curious. Just bumping that up to what's left in the FF&E budget. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
And also I would like to state that Joe and I have had a conversation last night about working with the state to make the case for tables, the kidney tables, the bookcases, and the student chairs for eligibility wise for the state. And Jack and I also had a follow-up conversation on that today. So we think we have a good case on those, except for the teacher chairs. That would be considered an additional. It is a spare. There's no need for 2 teacher chairs in there. So
I honestly think that you don't need it to be a teacher chair. You could make it another kid chair for the teacher to sit there. They don't need the big fancy one.
Yeah, I confirmed with Dr. Macri last night the intent before we had to issue the addenda, and she did request a second teacher's chair.
Oh, she did? Okay.
Yes, so
that's those chairs would clearly, that's no question about that. That's an ineligible item. The other items, we do feel we have a good case for eligibility.
Is that a significant cost difference between those chair types?
I had to look it up and don't have access to it right now while I'm presenting.
Okay. Well, because one we pay full price for and one we pay half price, correct?
Mm-hmm. If the state approves the eligible.
Okay. Is it possible to go back to Dr. Macri when we have that? I mean, if it's relatively insignificant, I guess that's one thing, but if it's a decent cost difference, would she be willing to reconsider if we put a different chair type in there? Or is it a done deal?
I think that's a question for Arcadis, maybe. I think we could. I'm not sure how that would work with the bid that we're currently waiting to receive.
Yeah, we will. It's a bid item. We'll receive it as a bid item. Joe did put it out as an addendum. Once you accept the bid, you can, if decide to modify the quantity, you don't have to order all the chairs that you're going for, but if Dr. Macri has confirmed with Joe last night, to go back. I don't know.
Blaze, do the teachers use the same kind of chairs today, or are they different chairs?
They do not. They use student chairs.
That's what I thought.
When they go to that table, that's just another student chair. It also has a smaller footprint, which again leaves you more space.
Do you ever put all students around the table?
Yeah, sometimes they do if they work on a project, absolutely. And then they'll fight over the fancy chair.
I was going to say, I would love to have the fancy chair if I was working on a project. Okay, all right, I won't belabor it, but just the question is there flexibility in either time or, if we needed to go back and ask Dr. Macri once we understand the cost implications? And if, I lean on Blaze for his expertise there on how they'd be used. So if teachers are okay with a regular chair, then, is there
Not-
room to change it if we
Not,
can?
not to appear insensitive, but if the teacher has that much problem using a student chair, their desk in this image is like 15 feet away. They can roll their chair over to the curved table if it becomes that uncomfortable for them.
And I bought my desk chair at Habitat for Humanity for $20, so they can do that too.
There's always an option. Yeah, the all the bids for the quantities of the chairs are going to be the same, so you will be comparing
Okay.
apples to apples for all. If you
Okay.
decide to just to award and then reduce the quantity, there won't be. I don't think there's enough room to contest because everybody's going to get the exact same quantity and they all bid the exact same thing.
I'll follow up with Dr. Becker tomorrow. Okay.
Okay. And the PV system. So I don't think they changed. I just changed the dates down here a little bit based on reviews with Newfield and where we were in the process. But just to recap, the estimate came in at 1.55. The direct cost is 1.38, and the estimate includes the design and estimating contingency, construction contingency, escalation at 2%. That will, the longer that goes out, it was based on a certain number of months, that number would go up. Pre-construction of 10,000, general conditions of 10,000, insurance, bonds, and CM fee. So again, we're still waiting for that documentation to submit the interconnect application. And I had pushed out the final CDs for the PCR to end of March with Board of Ed Building Committee approval at the 4-2 meeting. And then I can't see my screen because my computer's blocking it. The PCR would be the week of the 7th, and then issue bid documents towards the end of May. And I just had this in there as a reminder of where the PV was located in case we needed that for tonight's discussion. And then the payback estimate. So this again is estimated. You can see our total system estimate here that we saw on the last page. State reimbursement of 49.64% would be this much reimbursed, 770,000. Would bring you a total of 781 that would come from the town's money. And then this chart is based on years, the kilowatt hours produced, the blended rate, which we received. This is based off the current rate that we received from documentation that Claudio provided us, escalated up 2.5% per year, which would show you savings per year. That would give you an accumulated savings of 773,000 at the end of year 4, which is just under the amount of the cost to the system after the reimbursement. So just past the 4th year would be your total payback based on the current rate and the estimates.
And if you applied the Eversource rebate, the 300,000 and the potential tax credits, this would be even shorter.
Can you remind me what the general system life expectancy is?
Oh, I'm not sure what the life expectancy. I would expect it to be at least 20 years, a 20-year system. I could confirm that with CES.
I believe, Joe, that you are correct. I think the warranty or production of the PV panel manufacturers warrant that you will achieve at least X% of the original power generation for a period of 20 years. I don't know what manufacturer, from manufacturer to manufacturer, it may vary what their threshold is, 90% after 20 years or something to that effect, 80% after 20 years. But I believe
That's great.
the mayor is asking, does this take into account the larger footprint and energy usage? Yes, this is modeled based on the building that's under construction.
Right.
Well, I guess it's not like what's absent. This is really good. Thank you, Joe, for having this. I think what this shows is just what the system itself is going to produce. it's
Right.
absent like what the system is what the school is consuming. Because what we're just saying is,
Yeah.
to the extent we produce this and then that we forgo paying, this blended rate to Eversource, then it has the savings. So I think it's.
And either Joe or Claudio, do you recall? I know there was a number that CES had mentioned that a system of this size would satisfy X% of the annual usage. I think, was it something like 40% or 35% of the building's
More than that.
consumption?
That was like 60.
I think it was 60.
I think it was 60. Yes. I think that was the
60.
number.
Okay. So we still have to buy 40%.
Right. Yeah, so the system's producing the 482 kilowatt hours, or 482,000 kilowatt hours.
But Joe, when you had that image, I think one slide back of the footprint of the system, I just sent a snapshot of what was in the schematic design. I tried to do the whole presentation to you and Rosanna and the mayor, and the files were too big.
Yeah.
So then I just did snippets of it. So in your inbox, there's an email with a copy of the pertinent page from the schematic design slideshow, and it looks very, very similar. We didn't have all the rooftop equipment placed at that point of schematic design, but in the general roof areas, what was shown to be potential PV is very close to what you're showing on this scene right now.
Yeah, I did get that. Do you want me to share that, or?
I think it might be an interesting little trivia piece, especially if the mayor's still watching.
So
I
that's one of the snips.
Okay, that was a zoom in that lets you actually read the note that says
Yeah.
photovoltaics NIC.
Maybe
one that was labeled schematic design.
There we go. And rotate, and of course it goes the wrong way. Yeah, wow, we were pretty close.
Yeah.
Rosanna, I'm on the road. Is there anything else you need from me now that you've completed the conversation regarding the bookshelf?
I think we're all set, Claudio. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna log off.
Yeah, so this layout also takes into the required 10-foot setback from the edge of the building and clearances to get to the mechanical equipment. And also takes into solar shading. So if the roof screen is gonna, with the sun, is gonna block, we didn't shove panels here that would not be fully productive. And then I updated the schedule a little bit. So I extended out the Eversource review period here to basically the end of March. Also allowed additional time for state review. So this is about 7 weeks or so. And then procurement, award, and then starting installation in mid-August, which would be after substantial completion of the building and roof warranty being in place, which is preferred by Newfield. Any questions?
You don't have any questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Newfield.
Okay, you're gonna bring that up, Emily?
Yep. Just
Thank
about
you.
to share my screen.
So I got a flight through the building and then an overview of outside. It's about 13 minutes long. And when Emily brings it up, I can speak to it as we go through.
Yeah, if I could find the right button. Can you all see my screen?
No.
Says it's okay. There we go. Now can you see the screen?
Yes.
Coming up.
Loading.
Yep.
There
Yep.
we go. Now I see it.
So this video starts on the second floor of B. As you can see, we've gotten a lot of the first coat of paint on the walls. He's working on the frame right there, painting out the frame. That opening at the end of the hallway is the west side. And that opening will be closed up within the next 2 weeks here. All those are your light fixtures right there for the hallway and whatnot. And the stuff on the left is your ceilings. You'll see when I go into the room that we've begun ceilings. Next week, that whole entire hallway is going to have millwork and flooring in it. We're going to be starting the flooring activities the first week of February, as well as millwork shortly thereafter. These rooms are going to come together quite quickly, and our next video of this area is going to look significantly different. The files are so large, that's why it's a little herky-jerky, I think. But as you can tell, he's gone through, done a lot of these accent colors. This video was taken on Monday, by the way. It looks even more different today. Get a shot of the view there out the window. It's going to be a nice building for you. You'll see that when we get down into the first floor here, he's done a lot of the first coat of paint, not paint, but taping on the gypsum board, and they're really starting to come together on the first floor here as well. Once again, there's your light fixtures for the hallway downstairs. More light fixtures on the pallets there, getting ready to do all that work. All your major systems are now in place in the ceiling. Once he's done with taping down here, he's going to go into the priming of the walls, and then we can get right into ceiling grid down here. We've spent a lot of time sequencing the work so that once we start these finishes on the second floor, they can roll right down into the first floor and in sequence with how this walkthrough's taking place. So as you can see, your world language arts here in your faculty room in this offshoot of the one story of B building here into Main Street. Quick side note about Main Street, they started the brick veneer on the east wall earlier this week. It's coming along very nicely. We're getting into the kitchen here. I wanted to get over here because that piece of equipment sitting on the floor right there in front of us on the pallet is one of the hoods. And your UDS is now in place. So all of your kitchen equipment are going to be right along that wall right there in front of you. Your freezer cooler is behind and in place. Those are all permanently installed now. And actually the large cooking hood is in place now, as well as the dishwasher hood for the condensate. It's funny, I'm looking at this video right now. That entire wall is taped now. You'll see that the mason has been going through doing some of his rubbing and parging and touch up of the walls. I take a look into the main electrical room here. You'll see that they've started pulling a lot more of the feeders. A lot of the conduit and whatnot is in place now. We keep talking about this main distribution panel, which will be set on that concrete pad to the right there, up in the front of the room. We're looking at getting that, I'm hoping, by the second week of February. And that will allow us to start pulling our secondary wires and get closer to that primary wire pull from Eversource. As you can see down here in the BOE area, they now have gypsum drywall on all of the walls, pretty much. They've actually been in here this week. I was walking through here before the meeting, and they've done all the tops of walls with the taping. They're coming down now, starting to finish up this space. You'll have to go to the next video. Thank you. Thank you. So there's the front office of the admin. And then we're gonna come back down the hallway. Then we'll go right into the gym. When we get to the gym, you're gonna see that the main trunk lines of ductwork are being installed. They're actually nearing completion as of today. You'll see that the Tectum panels, the sound absorbing panels, have been installed on the ceiling. You're gonna see that we've been priming all of that out with paint up high. We work these situations like almost every other room from top to bottom. And obviously the last step will be the wood floor going in here. As you can see, he's going around, he's touching up the walls, starting to prime out and final coat some of this stuff with the first coat of final coat. The windows up top where they're on site. We're getting to that in the sequence here as we move around the building. See that over here in the corner, you'll see that they're building out CMU walls. That wall back to where it says exit there is now complete as of today. And once again, that was them working on Monday, so we got the pedal to metal still. This is down through the band room and the choral room. A lot of our overhead mechanicals are in place. They're over in here now, starting to do sheetrock at a fever pace. A lot of the in-wall rough has been inspected and passed. Just more of the same. And then when I come around here, you'll see that the auditorium is really taking shape. So there's the front of the stage and back walls in place now, as you can see. Once they get done with that whole band and choral area, they'll move into this space with the drywall. But everything's framed out now. We had a question the other day. The auditorium is going to seat 500 people. They've come in and they've field measured the space, and that process is well underway. The auditorium and the gym are probably going to be two of the last spaces that you see finished, just due to the nature of what we have to put in there for the finishes. So you have the A area. They're starting to really ramp up their drywall installations over here as well. You'll see these guys in the lifts are working with the plumbing insulation and pipe insulation, as well as assembling some of the hangers that are going to be used for the installation of some of the MEPs below the ductwork there. It's a lot to do with plumbing mains right there. But as you can see through all of the video, through the entire building, we're in every area, working every single aspect of the job right now. I come out the door here and I went around so that you guys can see where we're at with the brick as well.
I like the smiley face.
You guys got to do something every once in a while, right? So as you can see here, it's a nice shot of the windows. Those are fully caulked. The temp heat that we have running in the building right now is actually doing a really good job in that B section. As we tighten it up more and more, we're able to control the climate in there more readily. It's really nice to see those windows go as quickly as they are. As you can see, we're all the way up to that Main Street North entrance right there with the windows, and they're actually coming down now through the mechanical areas into the BOE there. The last video here will show you that. So in the BOE area there, they're starting to glaze all the windows and put in division lights and all that stuff. You see up on the upper portion of the roof there where the gym is, and in that mechanical well to the left, they've put up their girts for the metal panel systems. Once it thaws out a little more, I'm anticipating them being back to the site next week to continue their process. But as you can see, the BOE is all done with brick now. And as I come around to the front here, you'll see that we just tore down the scaffolding. That scaffolding that was hiding that brickwork there is now gone, and you'll see that it's all the white brick now. And they're heading down the A building now. So we're on schedule right now to complete the brick veneer work mid-February. And I came over here just so you could see your courtyard and what it really looks like now with all the brick. And you'll see the frames are in place now. We haven't glazed them yet. That's going to be happening in the next couple of weeks here, but courtyard's really looking complete now, which is going to be a good thing for when the weather breaks. We'll be able to get back in there and start doing all of the flat work for the courtyard, the concrete, and getting all of that stuff squared away. Any questions?
They look great. A lot of progress in a couple of weeks since we went there.
Uh,
It's
we're
a completely different building.
we're doing everything we can.
Appreciate that.
You're further ahead than my project that's got the same deadline. Looks good.
Thank you.
Continuing on with our agenda, we'll finish the construction phase updates with Newfield, and Newfield has for review and approval the AV equipment options.
Yeah, so the original proposal that was put on the table was for bulletin six, which had the total package all in cost of $122,602.78. What was asked was we take a look at some different options here. Joe was able to go back to D'Agostino, and them issued an email to me with two options for reducing the cost of this. Option one had a series of wired microphones. It was one wireless microphone for the presenter, and then everything that was going to be on tables or for anybody in the room was wired, as well as a series of of cost saving measures to reduce the amount of lecterns and all of that stuff. You can see here on the screen. That cost was going to come in at $71,838.86. And option two maintained the wireless microphones for the tables in the room and reduced the quantity from 14 from the base bid to 13, and then had the same reductions in quantities of equipment. Now that one came in at $108,073. Now, when looking at these numbers that are highlighted across the top, please keep in mind that we already approved $16,000 for infrastructure. So there's your cost.
So
Any
this
questions?
cost does not include the 16,000 already spent, or does it?
It doesn't. That's already been expended and the work is in place.
Yeah.
All three numbers are in addition to.
So there's things on option 2 that are not listed in option 1. Am I to assume that things like assisted listening system is not included in option 2? Or only the things listed in option 2, or is what's changing from the base option?
What you'll find is that the base bid was everything was in there, including the assisted listening. In option 1 and option 2, the everything below remove lectern is the same. That was the scope that was reduced from that base bid. So I believe that because it was not reduced from option 1 or option 2, the assisted listening would still be a part of the system. Joe, can you confirm that?
I cannot.
Can you scroll down just to
I'd have to confirm that with D'Agostino.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see.
I'm making the assumption because it wasn't listed directly within the narrative in the email of being reduced, that it would still be included within the cost of the 71 or the 108.
Right,
That
'cause
can
you're showing just reductions here, right?
Right.
that's correct. Yes.
So I would assume then I would agree with you that it's included.
Yes.
Doesn't seem to be much difference between the base and 2 for the cost difference. Let me rephrase that. It seems like a lot of reduction, but not a lot of cost savings.
And sorry, this is for the multimedia. Is that
The
what
media center,
the media center? Yeah, the media center.
just the media center.
You're basically saving $51,000 to go with wired microphones, and then that reduced scope of cameras, touch screens, HDMI outputs.
I mean, is one camera, that doesn't seem like enough.
No?
Well, if it's one fixed camera, like I'm just thinking now in the library at the high school, there's one camera that faces the screen if something's being presented, and then another at the table. So is that the 2 cameras they're counting? And we're gonna reduce to 1?
I don't think you would need a camera facing the screen in a more modern setup. I think if you're presenting like on a Zoom, it would just show whatever you're presenting. So you'd have a camera facing the people
Yeah, but it's
talking.
at like the lectern too. So it's also like if there's a public speaker at the meeting. Like there's like like Heather was saying, there's the camera like at the board or commission, and then there's the separate lecterns, and then would be a camera on that speaker as well. I
Yeah,
understand what you're saying.
and-
Like if you can like project the slides, like you should be able to stream them through whatever system that you're streaming on, but
Both options
there's
remove the
certainly-
lectern, so you don't have a need for a camera on a lectern.
Another iteration could be to keep the broader scope that's in the base bid, but go to wired instead of wireless microphones. And presumably you would have at least, a $30,000 reduction.
Was this, we were just looking at how we can save? Is that
Yeah.
what this is came out of? Where did that direction come from?
Well, because when we had originally talked about the media center increases, I don't think we expected it to be this much. Like it went from whatever it costs to do the modifications, 16,000 just for the infrastructure. And now on top of all that, another 100, potentially 122,000 worth of equipment.
For the wired mics, did we put an outlet in the center of the floor?
That's a negative.
So would it be wired like what we have at the, like on a cart? Like what we have at the high school?
Yes, I read the note in the description for that option, and yes, you would have wires on the floor.
That to me seems like we're going back in time.
Yeah.
Like we have this brand new school and we have a cart with 486 wires everywhere.
The
Not
only thing
87?
I'd say about the what kind of wireless mic is it? Is it like one you pin to your shirt, or is it like what we use just without a wire?
I didn't get into weeds far enough to see
Yeah.
what that
Well, it
device
says
was.
gooseneck.
It says
Is that-
gooseneck
wireless
microphone.
gooseneck.
Yeah, so I assume
One
it's a,
wireless handheld.
Yeah. So it's like basically what we have at the high school, except they'd be wireless.
So it's not like you're not gonna have it pinned to your shirt and walk home with it.
no.
No.
And the intention, right, if I remembering correctly, is to conduct like public meetings, or this is for this like scope of like the students conducting meetings?
I think they were thinking like if they wanted to have, like if Dr. Mackey wanted to have staff meetings in there, if the whatchamacallits, the
Board of Ed
PTO,
meetings.
Board of Ed, if they couldn't use the high school for some reason,
Future building committee meetings.
future building committee meeting. PTO. Yeah, we could have our meetings in there while we wait for the field to be done. Yay.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Heather. This is like one of these really tough decisions, right? Like you want to do it right and you want it to be able to meet the needs that we're trying to meet, right? Like I know it's very cumbersome and laborious to roll out that cart and set up the high school as it is today. And obviously there will still be some setup, right? This is a learning space and it's not going to be completely configured all the time, but
yeah, and I'm almost wondering if you don't need AV support at night, if this is like someone just directions on a wall, just go turn this button, turn that on, and you're good to go. I don't know.
Joe, was there anything here that was not that the AV consultant did not recommend that they proposed anyway?
I'm not sure what you mean. So are you asking if I believe D'Agostino provided everything that was asked for by the district? If that was answering your question.
Yeah, but like for like we're a lot of this equipment we're cutting in half, but in these reductions, right? Like reducing a camera from from 2 to 1. Is there anything here in their opinion that we shouldn't be proceeding with in these reduced scopes?
I haven't asked them that. So they provided a list of potential cost savings as was requested to review the but I don't have an opinion from them of which ones they would recommend to take before
Yeah.
others.
Yeah, is that who from the district would we need to get to weigh in on this?
As far as what they need,
Yeah, based off of how they're planning on it being used.
I think the plan that D'Agostino put together, it was based off of the needs that they had relayed to Perkins.
So
So basically saying, based on what we told them, we're going to use this media center for, this is what they came up with.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So like they would need to weigh in on the reductions, right? Like I don't feel like we're in a position to say like, yeah, you can do what you want to do with one camera or with 2 microphones versus 10, you know what I'm saying?
I mean,
I would hate
like
to
I said,
spend
I don't think,
$71,000 and
yeah.
then find out that it's not useful to them because it doesn't meet their needs and we just spent that money and it never gets used. You know what I mean?
I'm not a big fan of wired microphones. I don't think that's the right choice, first of all. So option 2, the reduction there, it's not a lot of reduction. You're removing a lot of stuff for not a lot of costs. You know what I mean? Like it feels like if we were gonna if removing all the cameras and reducing the microphone, all that stuff gave us like $50,000 worth of savings, that's a point of discussion. But for 14,000, I'm like, what are you're reducing a lot of capability and functionality for like minimal savings in the grand scheme of everything. Like 14,000 is a lot of money. I'm not saying it's not a lot, but in the grand scheme of a $70 million project, it's
Yeah, so sorry, maybe that was asked before, but what's driving the difference between option 1 and 2? What is it?
one has wireless microphones. I mean, one has wired microphones.
Yeah, so 14 wireless microphones cost $30,000.
It's really the system that's required for the
supports it.
wireless microphones, not just the microphone itself.
Oh, okay. Wow.
It's the
You're-
backbone.
I'd be in favor of going with the original, the base bid.
I agree. I don't see that there's enough of a savings to go to option 2. Like Rosanna said, we're cutting out a lot of stuff, and at the end of the day, I don't want to cut out something that reduces flexibility.
I'll take a motion if anyone wants to point out there.
Do we need a motion for just staying with what we already went with? Or do we
Well,
not?
we have to
we not
approve.
approved that yet?
We haven't approved this yet.
Yeah,
Okay.
your motion would be to approve the base bid as listed in PCO number 68. And
Got
then
it. Thank you for
the
clarifying.
amount, of course.
And,
But I
I'll
and,
make that motion.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
Shouldn't this go to the change order committee?
Actually, on that, Ken, it did go to the change order committee, but I deferred decision on it based on the fact that it was $122,000. And I felt that should be brought to the full committee.
Okay.
Personally, I have no objections to approving the 122 because I agree with a lot of the comments. If we're going to do it a brand new building, let's do it, do it right and have it all set. I don't want wires all over the place in a kind of a hunky-dunky configuration. So, but I just didn't feel it was appropriate to approve it just based on the dollar value.
Yep, fair enough.
All right, so Shannon made a motion. Any further discussion, or is there a second?
and then Roseanne, this was based on the needs you said of the folks that would be using the media center and
Right.
the administration.
I'll second it.
Okay. Any other further discussion? Not all in favor, give me a thumbs up. Anyone object? Just come off mute and say no. I think everyone voted positive. So motion carries.
Chris, to go proceed with PCO 68.
Yep, I'll let the guys know and we'll get everything moving.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for doing. I know that takes some work to pull all those different alternates. So I do appreciate like being able to facilitate that discussion. So thank you for that.
what we're here for. Thank you.
Up next, we have two PO increases requests for Perkins. The first one is in the amount of $3,500. It's PO increase number 22. It's for FF&E design, selection, and procurement of additional classroom furniture. As discussed earlier, the kidney tables, the bookcases, and the chairs. The motion would be that the CMSBC approves the listed PO increase number 22 to Perkins Eastman in the amount of $3,500.
Make a motion.
Make
So
a motion.
moved.
So, second.
All in favor, give me a thumbs up.
I apologize. I missed who did the motion.
Blaze and then Matt seconded.
Thank you.
Was there a comment? Okay, anyone object? Give me a thumbs down or come off mute. Okay, no one abstains. All right, the motion carries.
Next and last item for discussion is PO increase number 23 to Perkins Eastman. Abatement and oversight and monitoring during the removal of hazardous materials during the demolition of the existing Cromwell's Middle School building. Jack and I discussed the allocation of the cost, and it is CMS $98,231.07. Central Administration $4,844.56 for a total request as shown in their approval letter of $103,075.63. Up for discussion.
So
Is this it's during the demolition? We haven't demolished anything yet.
it's for the old school. So when they come in and they start tearing this school apart, they need to monitor the removal of the hazardous waste. So all the asbestos and everything that comes out. And then they need to
Okay,
take
so
air
it's-
samples. They have to go in there and measure the air and test it and make sure that we're not putting stuff in the environment, whatever that shouldn't be in the environment.
Sorry, Roseanne, I'm thinking we just approved the 3,500 for things that were just done. I wasn't forward looking.
Yeah,
I'm good.
this is-
Got it.
And it was not, so I talked to Jack. This typically is a service that the architects would cover under their contract, but for some reason it was not part of the Perkins contract. So it's
The scope of work in your request for proposals talked about the design of the remediation effort. There was not an allowance included, because again, until you design it, you don't know how much you've got, but there was no allowance included that would earmark dollars for the monitoring of the eventual removal.
and this is a do not exceed amount. So fingers crossed, they may not need to use it all, but the question Jack, so did we ever figure out, we don't have a budget line item for this? Because
At present, there
seemed
was no committee controlled line item value for environmental, because environmental services were included in the architect's scope. In our first draft of the budget, there was a line item with a placeholder value in there, and it was very early in the process removed. The fact that the contract did not contain the allowance for the eventual monitoring was not clear at the time. So this money would come out of owner's contingency.
And I'm guessing it was a miss when we went back for the second budget review for the second referendum. We went through everything.
There was no specific, discussion about this particular professional service. Again, we did at that time bolster the value of the owner's contingency, so we're more than covered to be able to afford this. But
Should just like kind of thinking for future projects, like this would have normally been outlined in our request for proposal.
Yeah, we should have had this in the RFP.
The
Listed it as
RFQ.
an, an RF, for
Okay,
environmental surveying,
okay,
monitoring.
Lessons learned. Yep.
yeah,
And again, since you haven't done the testing in order to determine what you have that needs to be removed, you usually don't ask the consultant to give a hard number at RFP time for a service like this, but it's not uncommon to have the contract include an allowance so that when you do get to that point, you do have a fund to draw from.
understood. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Question? If not, I'll take a motion.
So moved.
Your second?
Second,
All in favor, give me a thumbs up. Looks like it's unanimous, motion carries.
And that concludes our presentation for tonight.
Last meeting we talked about the wall or the signage for the front of the building. We did get Ron sent stuff over. I didn't get a chance to look at it. We probably do need to take a look at it. I think I forwarded it to everyone. Everyone get it? Take a
No.
look at.
Got it.
I'd like to have a discussion on it at our next meeting because I feel like we need to make a decision on what we're doing there. As far as like what that sign's gonna look like. So if we can look at the material, put some thoughts together.
It's
we
part
can
of that material looking at, like a lot of things, like we just looked at with the media center. Like, hey, option A would be this, option B would be this,
Yeah,
that type of thing.
that's all I had. Anyone have anything else they want to bring up?
moving surfaces, did we ever get the quotes
Oh,
that along?
yeah. Yeah, Jack, did we ever get a quote from you guys for managing the move?
Yes, that was approved.
That was approved.
That was approved 2 committee meetings ago, I would like to say.
Okay. I couldn't remember, but yes.
Okay, perfect. Been a whole year since then.
The whole year.
We did not have move costs for the moving company, but you did approve the ad service.
Anything else anyone has?
It's
So is
a
Annie, go ahead,
quick question, Emily. What's the current balance in the owner's contingency?
Give me 1 second and I'll get that number for you.
You don't have it memorized? Jeez.
It's like 2.1 million, if I'm not, it should be around around that ballpark for the middle school. It's easier to memorize.
All right, and then how much do we still have in CM contingency?
Chris, is that number around 1.5?
I was gonna say about 1.3.
Close enough.
So obviously we have adequate funding to do the field and do PV should all those come to fruition without any concerns.
Yet and more, because we were talking about PV and the field coming out of your bid savings, which is sequestered in a separate line item at the value of about 3.2 million.
Yeah, as things are going, we may not even have to dip much into that.
That's
So Ken, the owner
possible.
contingency for the middle school is 2,093,000. And the
That doesn't include what we just approved though, right?
right, correct. It does not include what you just approved. And the owner contingency for central admin currently stays at $140,000.
Yeah, they don't count.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, I'm very comfortable with where we're at budget wise. All those discussions we're having that's why I just raised it.
So are there any other risks when we move forward with the demolition of the old building?
There's always risk, John.
Well, we don't know what's in the basement of that building. I worry about that. There's walled up rooms in the basement of the building. You have no idea what you're gonna find in
We don't
there.
want to hit something we don't.
I know, crazy monsters,
That's
bodies, who knows?
probably Arrowhead pennies.
That's Al Capone's vault.
Or
There you go.
or Edgar Allan Poe stories.
Yeah.
So,
See if we can get our Geraldo out when we open it up.
Yeah.
okay, Rosanna, you said you'll send something. It sounds like you said Ron had put together something to
Yeah, I
look
thought I
at.
sent it out, but I'll send it after this
Okay.
meeting.
Oh, good talk. And then do we ever figure out for the thing that says Cromwell Middle School, is that's gonna, we're not doing backlights, we're doing,
Yeah, we talked about that last 2 weeks, 2 meetings ago. They're doing the backlit letters. That's what
oh, we are doing
voted.
backlit instead of
Yeah.
the front on.
That was
Okay.
the cheapest, and we actually liked it.
They look
Okay.
nice.
Sorry. Thank you.
Anything else? Anyone? Okay. Have a great night. I will see you all actually February 3rd, which is a week from Monday.
Oh,
If you guys can attend.
Yeah.
You don't have to, but it'd be good. Field study. They're gonna be talking about the turf field, so it might be good to show up if you can. Okay, now I'm really done. All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Have a
Take
good
care,
night.
Rex.
Good night, all.
Bye.